State your name and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Sandy Bernabei, and I'm a clinical social worker, and I'm in private practice in Westchester and in Midtown. And I'm also an anti-racist organizer with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond for the Undoing Racism workshops. And in addition to that, I'm the president of the National Association of Social Workers New York City chapter. And that's a long story. We'll get to it.
Oh, good. Good. So you mentioned that you're part of the AntiRacist Alliance. So can you tell us about this alliance and what are their goals?
Okay. It's a story.
Yes.
Back in 1995, I was working in Rockland County, and a friend of mine, her name is Phyllis Frank, she was the director of the volunteer counseling services at that time, and she, you know, one of these progressive women, progressive groups, and looking all over for like really good justice work. And she said, I was the executive director of the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, and we were doing really great work. And she said, Sandy, I found this training that is like transformative. Give me $250 and 2.5 days of your life and you'll never be the same. So we were doing great work, and out of respect and love, I sat through an Undoing Racism workshop. Right. And myself and other social workers sat there, and we could not believe that it was the first time that we had heard, that we received an education that connected all the dots. That we had been the directors, clinicians, working with human beings for years, had gone to the finest schools of social work in New York City and all around, and had not heard this analysis. And so at that time, you know, we were all working and very engaged in our work, and we started thinking, my God, we would have done things very differently had we had an understanding of what structural racism is, that it's everywhere, that's in all the institutions, and in fact, in the institutions where we were working and leading, and that it was in us. And all of a sudden, we started thinking, wow, we would have done everything differently. But the thing that we really were upset about is that the schools that we had attended didn't educate us about this. So we did our own education and growth. Then I moved on to Barnard College at Columbia University, and Manning Marable there was a Malcolm X expert. And they had archives. And so while I was working at Barnard College, I just immersed myself in everything Malcolm. And it turned out that Malcolm X is buried in the cemetery in my backyard in Ardsley, yes, in Hartsdale. So every morning I would like walk over, do a little pilgrimage, and go to Malcolm X. And just like really being intentional about my life. And I really, really grew. I grew a lot, and I got a lot of clarity about my work, and that my work was, you know, really to work with white people around undoing racism. But that workshop transformed my life. The Undoing Racism workshop is the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. They're the people who deliver this workshop. They're community organizers who also train. And it's out of New Orleans. It's an organization that is like 35 years old, led by people of color, and their analysis is very, very clear, similar to Malcolm X, that it's not people, but it's the system. You know, Malcolm X evolved, and he understood that it was the American capitalist system that was generating so much pain and suffering for people of color in this country. Anyway, so the People's Institute kept that analysis going on, and they gave this workshop, transformed us, and we said, we're going to start organizing in the schools of social work until every school of social work in this country trains their social workers to understand this. Like if you're working with human beings in this country and you don't understand race, what it is, how it functions, and if you don't understand that it was constructed, then you don't understand anything really. Everything you know is confused, right? So we started organizing, and in 2002, or actually it was way before that, maybe 2001, we were, some of the social workers, we were going to conferences or whatever, and I met Mary Pendergreen at a conference at Teachers College, and Mary Pendergreen was the president of the National Association of Social Workers at that time in New York City. And that was like a real connect, because, you know, social workers are working in all the schools, they work in all human service agencies, and they move around, but the one thing that brings you together is your professional association, like the Nursing Association or the Medical Society. So the National Association brings social workers together. And so we started to think, wow, if we could really move into that National Association of Social Workers, then we could begin to shape and have some influence. And so over the past decade, many of us have become board of directors, members of the board of directors, and in fact today I am the president of NASW New York City. But it isn't just me, it's half of the board. You know, we ran on a ticket that, you know, was anti-racist, and we actually got in, and it was just wonderful. So our vision is to transform social work education and practice. And we want, and listen, it's 2014 and there's not one profession that requires its professionals to understand race and racism, what it is, how it impacts people, okay? We want to be the first. We will be the first profession to define for its profession what race competencies are. You could be culturally competent, but that's not going to get to race. So we want to have race and culture competence. So that's what we're organizing around now, is establishing race competencies for the profession, and let it be a model for every other profession, you know, in this nation. One of the things that we learned from the Undoing Racism workshop is that if it was done, it could be undone, right? That's the whole process. That it's not about race, it's about undoing racism. And, you know, like racism was embedded in the Constitution, right? 3/5, you know, for the purpose of voting and all of that stuff. And we've had a hell of a time getting it out. By the time the Constitution was actually signed, every institution in this country was already formed, and institutional racism was already embedded in it. So the work that we do is not about catch the racist. It's about understanding that if we took every person who was racist and shot them up into outer space, every system would still behave the same. And that's why we have a president who's a black president, but not one institution has changed. So that implicit bias, that bias that is pro-white, is embedded in every institution, every textbook, every song, the whole culture. And you are your culture.
Yeah. So question, so you mentioned that one of your goals is to, for your profession, build this race competencies.
Yes.
How has that been going along? Has it been a difficult journey?
Yes.
Can you tell me about it a little bit more?
Yes.
What are some of the challenges, and how have you been able to overcome it and start influencing and making change?
Okay. The minute we talk about race, white people get really frightened because they're afraid you're going to accuse them of being racist. And when we think of racists, we think of the most horrible human beings on planet Earth. You think of 12 years a slave. You think of those horrible things, right? So nobody wants to be associated with racist. So that's why this is not about racist. This is about understanding that everybody drank the Kool-Aid, even people of color. If you are raised in this country, if you are educated in this country, you are living and breathing the culture, the messages, and everybody internalizes it. So the work is to help us undo that, to detox and to transform. So what did we do? The Undoing Racism workshop acts as a clearing. So as people go through the workshop, when they come out, it's not like they're like, you know, perfect, but we have a definition, we have a history, we understand, everybody has the same understanding, and we understand that we're personally responsible to undo it, but we're not responsible for the racism. It's institutional. And that white people benefit, whether you want to or not. Every system is going to benefit you. So unless it's anti-racist, and you have this understanding, business as usual, you could be a well-intended white person, good. You could be a minister, you could be a rabbi, it doesn't matter. If you just do business as usual, the outcomes will be disproportionately advantaging white people. Another way of looking at it is that the outcomes will be disproportionately negative for people of color. And the data really proves that. Every institution delivers the same negative outcome for the same group of people. Every single institution. Why? Because it was embedded, right? Okay. So social workers, not just social workers, human service practitioners. So you're talking about clergy, you're talking about educators, nurses, doctors, social workers, right? We all work in these institutions and inadvertently participate in outcomes that are negatively impacting communities of color. So what we want are for people, wherever they are, to start organizing, to bringing more people through the Undoing Racism workshop so that we can turn the mirror inward to look at how we have to detox ourselves, that we have to go into a recovery process from the life that we've been living in denial, colorblind, don't talk about it, distance yourself. You know, people do that around drugs. We call them addicted. We put them in treatment. So all of that has to be dealt with. So after people come out of the Undoing Racism workshop, they start organizing in their families, in their churches, in their communities, in their programs, and more people have come through this workshop. Right now, we're closing, they're doing a workshop down at the National Association of Social Workers. It's workshop 169. We've had over 8,400 people come through the workshop. So what's happened is that clergy, for instance, will come through it, and then they'll have a monthly meeting. The graduates of the Undoing Racism workshop within the faith communities or the congregations will have a monthly meeting to look at how structural racism is embedded in the canons, in the laws, in the doctrines, in the education that they've received. So you have women of color, they meet each month.